Hello everyone, and welcome back to my series where I look at every mainline Zelda game, giving them a review, looking at their place in the franchise, and examining how the formula changes and evolves over time. Today we're looking at the first game in the series that almost everyone will agree is good, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Released in 1991 for the Super Famicom and 1992 for the SNES, this game returns to the top-down style of the first Legend of Zelda game. While it might be expanding on the gameplay of Zelda 1, it doesn't completely neglect what Zelda 2 brought to the table either. This game further builds on the world of Hyrule, and experiments with ideas from both of the previous games. I mentioned last time that a balance between freedom of exploration and structured worlds is a big part of Zelda's appeal, and with a leap forward to 16-bit hardware, A Link to the Past is the first game that can attempt that balance. The question is, does it reach that goal? Here's a reminder of how these videos are structured, and let's dig into it. The story this time around is a lot more substantial. Not only that, the more powerful hardware means that the story can actually be in the game this time, not just relegated to the manual. Long ago, there was a mysterious golden power that was sought by many, although nobody who quested for it ever returned. But one day, evil began to flow from the golden land that the power resided in, so the King of Hyrule sent 7 wise men to put a seal on the golden land. In the present, an evil wizard named Aghanim killed the King of Hyrule and used black magic to make the descendants of the wise men disappear. He's about to do the same to Princess Zelda, who, in her hour of need, reaches out telepathically to Link and begs him for help. I feel I should note here that this Link is not the same Link as the one from the previous 2 games. Nowadays we know that Link to the Past is actually a prequel to Zelda's 1 and 2, but functionally this game acts as a reboot, so I'm not going to go too deep into the timeline in this video. Got it? Good. Back to the plot. Link's uncle goes to the castle, and when Link follows, he finds him dying on the ground. You take up his sword and go through the castle to find Zelda in the basement dungeon. The two of you escape through a secret passage in the sewers, after which a sage tells you to track down the elder Sahasrahla. He tells you that you'll need the Master Sword to defeat Aghanim, and to get it, you'll need the 3 pendants of courage, wisdom, and power. After you do that and grab the Master Sword, Aghanim tracks down Zelda and captures her, so you storm Hyrule Castle and show up just in time to see Aghanim make Zelda disappear. After a quick round of tennis, he sends you into the Dark World, which is the corrupted form of the Golden Land. This is where Aghanim sent all the maidens from the intro, and he's hidden them in dungeons around the Dark World. As you rescue them, it becomes clear that Ganon is the main threat, the one who grabbed the golden power of the Triforce and wished for the Golden Land to become corrupted by his evil. If Link can defeat him, though, the Triforce will grant his wish instead. After saving all the maidens, including Zelda, it's time for the final assault on Ganon's tower. Link fights his way through and slaps Aghanim again, who is revealed to be Ganon in disguise. After one final showdown and a few silver arrows to the face, Ganon perishes, for now, and Link wishes for everything to go back to normal. The dead people come back to life, the Golden Land is restored, and everything is good again. Now, as you can probably tell, this story is much more involved than the first 2 games. This comes from the fact that it actually progresses as you play. The stories of the first 2 games are basically all set up. You get a goal at the start of the game, and it never really changes. Here, though, your goal changes as the situation does. You start out looking for the Master Sword, and when you get it, the princess gets captured, and the goal becomes to save her. It's still simple, but it gives this story a sense of progress that the stories thus far have lacked. Not only that, but as the situation changes, so does the world. A simple example is that the game starts on a stormy night to set a moody tone for the intro, before changing to sunshine to signal that the adventure has truly begun. Another example is that after you get access to the Dark World, people stop wandering around Kakariko Village and are replaced by soldiers, which demonstrates the raised stakes. Speaking of Kakariko Village, the added focus on world building from Zelda 2 continues in this game. Kakariko might be the only town, but it's a lot more substantial than all the towns of Zelda 2 put together. It's got a library, an inn, a smithy, a farm, a fortune teller, and a couple of shops. Yeah, I was looking back over my Zelda 2 script, and I couldn't believe that I didn't once mention that money was removed as a system. I accidentally cheated you guys out of a joke about inflation, sorry about that. But yeah, rupees and shops return in A Link to the Past, and they help fill out the world. The actual people in Kakariko are better too. They aren't super deep, but they are memorable. There's the 2 arguing brothers, the bug-catching kid, the dwarves, and the traveling salesman. One detail I really like is that some people sit guards on you. You see, Aghanim posts wanted posters of Link saying that he kidnapped the princess, so some people will call guards and run away when they see you. It made sense in Zelda 2 that everyone knew Link was a hero because of what he did in the first game, but this Link is an unproven nobody. And while most people know Link means well, you just know there were some people who'd only ever seen him around a couple times and were thinking to themselves, I don't like how quiet that kid is. He's bad news. It might have a few generic old people, but Kakariko has a lot more character than the parade of jar women and arrow clones that Zelda 2's towns had. And, while Kakariko might be the only town, it's not the only place where people are. There's the Lumberjacks, who are called the Bumpkin Brothers. Okay then. The Zora in this game aren't just monsters anymore. You can meet their king and he'll talk to you and sell you flippers and junk. So, in this game they probably aren't evil, just jerks. There's this mysterious hobo who lives under the bridge and yet somehow knows Link's name. What secrets are you hiding? There's the lonely old man on Death Mountain who warns people away from the Dark World portal that's up there. That detail is actually relevant to another character. Flute Boy here went missing after going to the mountain, and you later find him stuck in the Dark World. There's the witch and her assistant who run the potion shop. Oh yeah, potions are another thing this game brings back from the first game that Zelda 2 omitted. Why didn't I mention that in my Zelda 2 script? I even mentioned potions. Anyway, I like the witch. It's fun to see someone straight out of a storybook just hanging out in Hyrule. It fits the new art style pretty well. Let's see, am I forgetting anything? Oh yeah, the average middle-aged man. That's a fun moment, almost feels like something right out of Earthbound. Why would he make this sign? I know it's because he's trying to hide his ties to the thieves in the forest, but come on, dude. This is like wearing a shirt that says, I don't have children locked up in my basement. It just raises further questions. Aside from characters, the world is also made more authentic through a few instances of foreshadowing. For example, Blind the Thief is mentioned very early in the game in Kakariko, long before you fight him. So, when you get to him, he isn't just a random monster. He's a guy that you heard about way before you knew anything about the Dark World, and now you can piece together what happened to him and why. All of that's good, but I've got my problems. The Dark World could have done with more varied characters. There are a couple scattered around, but most want the same thing. Money. Even the talking monkey just wants money. To be fair, this is set up well. The Dark World equivalent of Kakariko is plastered with signs telling you to get out if you don't have any rupees. These characters do have pretty unique designs, so I guess that's something, but there's not much else to talk about with them. There's also a few things that are just kinda weird, but not in a fun way, more of a this doesn't feel quite right way. The guy who gives you the magic mirror is a good example of what I mean here. It makes sense that he would have it. His granddaughter is one of the 7 maidens, so that means he's descended from the 7 wise men. And it also makes sense that he would give it to the hero of legend, but he doesn't ever seem to realize that Link is that hero. He just thanks you for escorting him, and then when you talk to him he acts like he decided you were the hero off screen. And I mean, you are, but it feels like they missed a step in writing that interaction, you know? But ultimately, these are just nitpicks. A Link to the Past does so much right that they don't detract from the overall experience. Before we conclude this section, though, I would be remiss not to talk about the manual. The manual for A Link to the Past is phenomenal, way better than the first 2 manuals. The game itself is free to have a lot of the story in it, including quite a bit of the history of Hyrule through these little tidbits that the 7 maidens give you. And since so much of the slack is being picked up by the game, the manual is free to start setting the tone and expanding on the lore that the game sets up. The manual is presented as an ancient scroll left behind by the Hylians, and it begins with the creation myth of Hyrule. It tells the tale of the 3 gods of power, wisdom, and courage, and how they breathed life and magic into the world, before leaving the Triforce behind to grant power to those who are worthy. It goes into more detail about how the thief Ganondorf stole that power and became Ganon. Yeah, Ganondorf is a concept that was introduced in this game. I'd never actually played A Link to the Past before this video, and until now I would have sworn that Ganondorf didn't come until Ocarina of Time, but no, here he is. You don't actually see him pre-Ganon in the game, but still, that caught me by surprise. The manual then goes on to explain that there was a great war to place the seal on the Dark World, how Ganon wormed his way into being the royal advisor, and how he's getting up to sketchy stuff in his tower, all of which is the perfect primer for the opening of the game, where he makes his big move and kills the king. God, I miss when game manuals were good. I gotta give massive props to Yoshiaki Koizumi. He both wrote and did the artwork for the manual. It was his first job out of college too, so it's even more impressive. Now, for my overall thoughts on the story. If you couldn't tell, I quite liked it. I really liked the expansion of the world of Hyrule. It's not a huge game, just one town and some scattered people, but the characters here are quite charming. I like how the story feels like it's actually developing over the course of the game, and I like how Hyrule feels like it has actual history. It's not my favorite Zelda story, but it is definitely the best we've had so far. A Link to the Past returns to the top-down format of the first game, but with some tweaks that make it play much smoother. For starters, 8-directional movement has been implemented, which makes moving Link around a much less clunky experience. Additionally, the stab move has been replaced with a wider slash attack. This one change makes sword combat much less of a hassle, since you can attack things both in front and at a diagonal. The sword beam returns, but only once you get the Master Sword. I like this change. It makes the Master Sword feel like more of an upgrade than just a damage buff. Link has also received an important new move, the spin attack. By holding down the attack button, Link will hold his sword out. On its own, this causes Link to automatically attack any enemies that come near, but after holding it for a few seconds, Link can release the button to spin. Not only does this hit in all directions, it also does twice as much damage, so it's a very useful move. The game world has also become more layered, which is relevant because now Link is able to jump off of ledges and onto lower ground. This is used for navigation, exploration, and puzzle solving. As you progress through the game, you also gain additional movement options. The Pegasus boots let you run forward, holding your sword out and charging through enemies. This is a great addition, letting you cover vast distances quickly, and it also lets you destroy certain obstacles, so it has use in exploration too. You get the Zora flippers, letting you swim and use these warp pools. Picking up and throwing things has been added as a mechanic, and there are 2 upgrades to it that let you pick up different kinds of objects to open up more of the world. And finally, the magic mirror lets you shift from the dark world to the light world wherever you want, which is needed to reach certain areas. Other permanent upgrades to Link include upgraded swords, shields, and armor. Usable items are also back with a vengeance. The classic bow, bomb, and boomerang are all back, and hey, look at that, they actually bothered to give the bow its own ammo count this time. The hammer from Zelda 2 returns, as does the idea of a magic meter. That gets used for a lot of things, including the returning magic rod, although it's been split into 2 separate rods for fire and ice this time around. But the biggest changes are in the new items, and there's a lot of them. Magic powder, 2 magic canes, and the magic cape are all items that use the magic meter. Magic powder lets you turn some enemies into different ones, which is a really weird inclusion. I think I'd like it more if there were more than 2 transformations. That would have made it a lot more fun to mess around with, but as it is, I didn't use it much. The Cane of Samaria lets you make blocks that can hold down switches and stuff, which is somehow an even weirder inclusion. At least this one has a cool use in a dungeon, so that's something. The other Cane and the Cape do basically the same thing, make you invincible. I don't know why they felt the need to have 2 invincibility items, but hey, I ain't complaining. The magic system also includes the new medallions. These are basically screen nukes that deal specific elemental damage. You get 2 of these by using the Book of Mudora. This book is the most situational item in the game, but I still like it. Translating ancient writing is great. It helps enhance the feeling that the world has history within the gameplay. The hookshot is one of the coolest new additions, grappling hooks always are, and it opens up more options for traversal and puzzle solving. The flute is another fantastic addition. It lets you use this bird to fast travel all around Hyrule. Between this and the Pegasus boots, getting around is no issue at all. Last, but certainly not least, is the new bottle system. You can find a total of 4 bottles stashed around Hyrule, and you can put useful stuff in them. Potions are the obvious choice, and they've been expanded since Zelda 1. They're one use only now, but they come in 3 varieties, health, magic, or both, and they'll completely refill whatever they're made for. But that's not all. With the net, you can catch bees, and more importantly, fairies. Unlike potions, fairies don't have to be actively used to heal you. They're automatically consumed when you die and revive you. They restore a fixed amount of health, so their utility drops off once you get more hearts, but the safety net is very appealing. My preferred loadout by endgame was 2 fairies and 2 blue potions. That's a good segue to talking about exploration, because fairies have been made more important there too. Great fairy fountains are no longer just health refills, in fact they're not health refills at all. Instead, the great fairies around Hyrule offer upgrades. There are 2 who will upgrade specific items, one of which being the silver arrows, so that one's actually required. The other one offers inventory expansion for your bombs and arrows, but she charges 100 rupees a pop. I didn't actually use her much in the playthrough I recorded. The game is good about giving you the stuff you need when you need it. Plus, the max amount is frankly obscene. Seriously, when are you ever going to need 50 bombs? I'd rather save my money for potions, thanks. Not that money was hard to come by. There aren't quite as many money rooms as there are in Zelda 1, but the payouts are much better. The rupee limit is now 999 instead of 255, and they certainly knew that when deciding the amounts you get. This game also brings back health and money drops, both from enemies and from interacting with the environment. Behold, Link, the hero who funds his adventures by mowing his neighbor's yard. And if all that wasn't enough, this game also brings back gambling from the first game. Ooh, my favorite. Although now there are more mini-games than just gambling. There's the digging game, the shooting gallery, and the obstacle course. And with those mini-games comes the replacement of heart containers, pieces of heart. You still get full heart containers for beating bosses, but in the overworld you get these. You need 4 of them to make a full heart container, and there's 24 to find throughout the world. I think that's it for core gameplay. Overall, A Link to the Past improved on the movement and combat of the first game, with added bells and whistles. The stiffness of Zelda 1 is completely gone, the world is more fun to traverse and explore, and the improved swordplay and items give you meaningful variety in combat. This is a great game from a gameplay perspective. Now, let's see how this improved gameplay works with the structure of the game. Takashi Tezuka was back in the director's seat for the development of A Link to the Past, with Miyamoto as a producer. Kensuke Tanabe, who had previously directed Super Mario Bros. 2, was also brought on as a scriptwriter. A Link to the Past was in development for 3 years, with an initially small team working on it and more people being brought in as the project began to take shape. Miyamoto wanted the game world to feel interactable, stating that he felt Zelda's core appeal was in the ability to experiment with the game world and make discoveries through trial and error. Hence, the ability to push, pull, lift, and throw objects were implemented to give players that feeling. Tezuka and Tanabe, meanwhile, wanted the player to feel an emotional connection with Link. The scene where Link pulls out the Master Sword was one of the first things conceived of by Tanabe, and they structured the early game around building a sense of growth for the player that eventually leads to that moment where Link pulls out the Master Sword and truly becomes a hero. That's why the game starts as it does, on a rainy night with a swordless Link going to see what's up with that mysterious voice he heard. It's so that the player can feel every step from confused boy to worthy hero. After getting the Master Sword, the game would then become the quest for that hero to stop Ganon and save the world. It's interesting to consider A Link to the Past in that context, because the game before and after getting the Master Sword is quite different structurally. Before getting the Master Sword, the game is very linear. There are detours you can make as you get more stuff, like how you can get the Zora flippers as soon as you have the Power Glove from the second dungeon, but you have to do the dungeons in order. After you get the Master Sword, though, the game becomes more open. You always have to do the first Dark World dungeon first, since you need the hammer to access the rest of them, but after that it's basically your call. Sure, the dungeons are labeled in the order they want you to do them in, and you might run into roadblocks where you need certain items, but nothing's stopping you from, say, going straight to Dungeon 4 so you can get the Titan's Mid as soon as possible. Or from doing Dungeon 6 before 5 so you can use the Cane of Samaria to skip that annoying block puzzle. I didn't know you could do that in the playthrough I recorded though, so I just had to deal with it. What I'm getting at is something that I mentioned in the Zelda 2 video. Linearity brings with it the chance to be more focused. In this case, the build-up to the Master Sword is linear to focus on the sense of growth. They dictate when and what items you get to make you feel like you're getting stronger, to make you feel like the world is getting bigger, and to make you feel like you earned that Master Sword. After that, while you still feel like you're growing with each new item you get, the game lets go of the reins a little bit. It trusts you enough to make your own choices and your own mistakes. Maybe you get halfway through a dungeon and realize you need an item you don't have to fully complete it. Maybe a boss is giving you a hard time because you don't have a good item for it. And maybe, sometimes, none of that matters because you had enough to get through regardless. You're supposed to have the Fire Rod for Dungeon 5, but I didn't. What I did have was the Bombos Medallion, and that worked just fine for me. I really like the way this plays out. It feels like the game itself is acknowledging what you've accomplished, and any mistakes you make just adds to that feeling. I made a pretty big mistake, but it's an interesting story, so I'm glad the game allowed it. Basically, this eyeball boss in the 6th dungeon kept killing me over and over again. I could not get a read on its lightning attack, and I still hadn't internalized that potions are better healing than fairies. I wound up looking up a guide and discovered that the magic cape makes the fight a complete joke. So I looked up where that was, and then smacked myself because, man, I know where that is. It was on my mental list of places to check when I was in the area, I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. I felt a little bad about using the guide after that, because if I had done what the game clearly wanted and explored when I got stuck, I wouldn't have needed it. Speaking of guides, I can say with confidence that this is the first Zelda game that has no need of a guide at any instance. The main objectives are marked on the overworld map, which is leagues better than the overworld map in Zelda 1. Additionally, secret design is nowhere near as obtuse as the other two games. If there's a wall you can blow up, there's almost always a crack to indicate it. I was going to say that this takes away some element of surprise. Don't get me wrong, I'd rather have this than the Zelda 1 approach, but there are a few explodable walls that I think you could intuit without a crack, like this house in Kakariko that has an obvious side room when you look at it from the outside. Fortunately, though, that is actually addressed. Instead of making any wall potentially explodable, they go the opposite way, and have a few cracked walls that aren't. This also means the new crack in the wall idea doesn't completely invalidate another new feature, which is that Link can now hit a wall with his sword, and based on the sound it makes, determine if it's got a room hidden behind it. That is a really nice bit of realism that adds to the feeling of being an adventurer, and it keeps secret rooms fun to discover. On top of that, hidden rooms aren't the only kind of secret anymore. Sometimes the entrance to a room is obvious, and instead there's a combat or puzzle challenge to get the secret inside. And many secrets take the form of puzzles in the overworld. Often this involves finding a way to somewhere not easily accessible, and that's where Dark World swapping is most relevant. Maybe a high ledge in the Light World is at ground level in the Dark World, so you walk onto it and swap, that sort of thing. Those kinds of puzzles aren't limited to the Dark World, though, like how you have to figure out that you can jump into the well in Kakariko to get to the higher ledge inside this cave. I mentioned briefly that the world was more layered, and this is probably the first time you'll utilize it for puzzle solving. As far as introductions go, this is a fun one, even if it doesn't make much sense topographically. There's also a few instances where you have to interact with the world in a certain way, like getting the Quake Medallion by throwing a rock into this pond. Some of these are a bit obtuse, like the Dark World Great Fairy Fountain requiring a super bomb to blow up the wall, or bringing this locked chest to the average middle-aged man, but even in these cases there are NPCs around the world who will tell you about them. I find the secret design of this game to be very fair, overall. I did wind up pulling out the guide again for the last few heart pieces, but in every case it was a matter of me just not having thought to look there. Special shout out to the heart piece you get through the outer ledge of Turtle Rock. I definitely explored that area in the Light World, and noticed that there was one ledge I couldn't get to by jumping. I just didn't connect that to the ledge in Turtle Rock. I felt like an idiot afterwards, and that's how you know it's a good puzzle. Speaking of heart pieces, I think they're a really great idea. By splitting health upgrades into quarters, that quadruples the number of places you can find health upgrades. It means that not only can there be a whole bunch of secrets again, but also that more of those secrets feel meaningful. Zelda 1 kinda has that problem. Since it gives you heart containers all at once, there's actually only 5 locations in the overworld where you can get them. Sure, money is a good reward, but it's not as impactful as more health. A Link to the Past, though, has 24 good rewards just to do with health upgrades, not even counting hidden items like the Magic Cape, so it gets to have both quality and quantity. Splitting them up also motivates you to complete the set. What I mean by that is that if you see that you've got 3 heart pieces, you might decide to put whatever you're doing on hold and explore for another one. It's one more way the game can offer choice and exploration, and that's a great thing. And you might need those extra heart containers, seeing as dungeons are back with a vengeance. I don't mean in terms of difficulty, this game is no Zelda 2, but in terms of complexity. Continuing on from the world being more layered, dungeons now have multiple floors. Technically Zelda 2 started this, but it barely used it. It felt like a side effect of the game being a side-scroller, rather than an actual mechanic. A Link to the Past, though, makes use of the fact that there are multiple floors a lot more, with puzzles involving pushing things off ledges, making holes in the floor to get lower, and enemies that can push you off and reset your progress. Okay, yeah, that one kinda sucks. It also helps that A Link to the Past brings back the map and compass idea from the first game, and since the map shows all the floors, you can more easily see where rooms line up and how you can use higher floors to your advantage. All of this is just one reason that the puzzles this time around feel so much better to solve. The other big reason is that the usable items this time play a bigger role. In Zelda 1, puzzles were mostly just about finding the right wall to bomb or block to push, and the items were mostly relegated to just combat. This time, though, the items are used in puzzle solving, too. I like this fire rod puzzle in Turtle Rock. Figuring out the best times to light these torches so they don't go out before you get back to the door was fun. I like the switch puzzles. They let you use the bow or boomerang when they put switches out of reach, and you can also use bombs to delay when the switch is pressed, which is fun. Another puzzle I liked was in the Desert Temple, although that has more to do with the setup than the actual puzzle. See, there's a whole bunch of torches in the rooms prior, and if you're anything like me, then you lit them all and were very disappointed when nothing happened. Then, right at the end of the dungeon, the torches finally do something. And not just something, they make the whole wall disappear. That got a chuckle out of me, especially because the one that works is also the easiest layout. That's not to say all the puzzles are showstoppers. There's a lot of rooms that just open when you find the hidden switch or when you defeat all the enemies. But there's enough creativity on display here to keep things interesting. That's a good place to talk about combat, the other major component of dungeons. We're back to the Zelda 1 approach of items being useful in combat, which combined with Link's advanced moveset and swordplay makes it far easier than either of the previous games. Which isn't a bad thing, I should stress. Fighting regular enemies is a more comfortable experience, which I enjoy because it means that I can focus on navigating the more complex dungeons. Bosses are a bit tougher, but they're not too taxing if you're properly equipped. They tend to play into the dungeon's main gimmick, which makes the bosses feel thematically relevant. For example, the Ice Dungeon boss has to be opened up with fire magic like you have to do for the other enemies in the dungeon. Or how the Sandworm fight has them burrowing into the ground, just like the other enemies in the dungeon. Or, indeed, the worst fight in the game, the Moldorm, that can knock you down to a previous floor, just like the other enemies in the dungeon. I know I already complained about this, but seriously, who thought it was a good idea to make its health reset whenever you fall down? If it wasn't for that, this fight would actually be pretty cool, but no, they just had to ruin it. Besides that, there's not much to talk about with combat. It works, and it's fun. Part of me does miss the heavy focus that Zelda 2 gave its combat, but for the kind of game A Link to the Past is, this is fine. Overall, I greatly enjoyed my time with A Link to the Past. I've got some problems, but unlike the previous games, there's no single issue that runs through the entire game. The bad moments are just that, moments, and they don't detract from the very solid core. The exploration is better than ever, with more secrets, more power-ups, and great dungeons. I didn't even mention some of my favorite dungeon gimmicks, like the way that the Skeleton Woods has multiple entry points you have to navigate. The combat is smooth, it flows really well without becoming a cakewalk, and thus it enhances the exploration instead of detracting from it. The puzzles are more interesting and aren't limited to just dungeons anymore. It has a great sense of progression, both within the story and in the structure of the game. The story itself is the best we've had so far, with memorable characters and great lore and world building for Hyrule. This is a fantastic game, and if you're like me and weren't born yet in 1992, and or have never played it before, I highly recommend it. This section should be interesting, since A Link to the Past is in a bit of a strange place with regards to the series. It's a third game that goes back to what worked in the first, after the second went in a completely new direction. It's got parts from both previous games in there, and it's also interesting from the perspective of the future. But before we get into all that, let's talk aesthetics. We've made the jump forward to 16-bit hardware, and it shows. The world is much more detailed, with a lot more small things that make it stick out, like the animals that hang around the Master Sword's plinth, or the constant storm around the Dark World's Death Mountain. Like last time, the differences are most apparent with locations that were in the previous game, so this time let's use building interiors as the point of comparison. In Zelda 2, buildings might have a table, maybe a fireplace, and they all look the same. In A Link to the Past, you get tables, chairs, bookshelves, barrels, Mario Easter eggs, lots of stuff. And buildings look different based on what they are, like how the inn has a bar area, or how the sanctuary has pews and stained glass windows. It's also the first game that I can say has a distinct art style. It's a bit cartoony, but in a way that looks closer to a storybook than certain future games. The artwork in the manual continues this, with Link looking a little too goofy to be an epic fantasy protagonist, but also not quite cartoonish. I don't know, I'm not super knowledgeable about art styles, but I can say that it looks good. And the character design is great. In the story segment, I listed a bunch of characters, and they all have unique, readable designs. It means there's not a lot of people who feel generic. And when you get to the Dark World, the designs take a turn for the weird. Most people are some kind of imp or monster, but there's also talking hands and trees and stuff. For that matter, even the non-talking trees still have faces and shoot bombs at you. And the monster design in the Dark World is great. I like the kappas that slide on their bellies like penguins. I like the cyclopses that throw bombs at you. And I like this thing, the little mouth that bounces around trying to eat you. It's creepy, but in an endearing sort of way. There's a few creepy things in this actually, and I really dig it. Everything in this game has visual personality, even Link. He's as stone-faced as ever while fighting, and the item Get Sprite is unfortunately kinda bland, but it shines through on occasion. Whenever he pulls on something unpullable, he gets red-faced. When he swims, he looks like someone who's never swam before in his life, which to be fair is probably true. And of course, this is the game where Link has pink hair. Why'd they give him pink hair? I don't know, but I like it. It gives this Link a bit of distinction from all the others. The soundtrack is pretty good. It also sees the benefit from the new hardware. It's the biggest soundtrack yet, and the most varied. Some songs are atmospheric, like the dungeon music and the cave theme. Some feel homey, like the Kakariko theme and the Great Fairy theme. And some bring a sense of adventure, like the new remix of the Overworld theme and the new Dark World theme. My favorite songs are probably the Dark World theme and the Great Fairy theme. The title screen for A Link to the Past shows off its new visuals and sound wonderfully, with the polygonal Triforce pieces flying in before that fanfare starts. Really get you pumped for what's ahead. One last point about the soundtrack, quite a few songs here go on to become series staples. Zelda's Lullaby, Kakariko's theme, and the Great Fairy Fountain theme all come back later. That's a good transition to talking about A Link to the Past in the larger context of the series. Let's actually start with what's less good than the first two games, because spoiler alert, it's a very small section. This game is the first to not have a second quest. Wait, did I mention in the Zelda 2 video that it had a second quest? Man, what was wrong with me when I was writing the Zelda 2 script? Anyway, yeah, Zelda 2's second quest was not a remix of the game like in Zelda 1. Instead, it's closer to what nowadays we'd call New Game Plus, aka the same game again but you keep all your upgrades. And A Link to the Past eschewed the idea completely. It's not like the series never brings back the second quest idea either, so the fact it's missing here feels a little weird. I do understand why, though. According to the developers, 50% of what they planned to have in the game wound up being cut, so they were probably tight on cartridge space. Still, it means the game is a little less replayable in that sense, although taken as a whole I'd much rather replay Link to the Past over the previous two games, second quest or not. And yeah, I think that's it. Now let's talk about what it builds on from the first two games. The first, most obvious choice is that it returns to the top-down perspective from Zelda 1. It refines the overall gameplay and returns somewhat to the non-linear structure of the first game. However, it only uses that structure in the second part of the game. The first part follows the Zelda 2 model of giving you small parts of the world that gradually open up as you get more items. The first half also draws from Zelda 2 by focusing on the world building. One of the first quests is to find Sahasrahla of the Sage, but he isn't in Kakariko when you get there. You have to ask around and find someone who knows where he went. And, of course, asking townspeople for information was also a big part of Zelda 2. In that game, it gave the world a feeling of authenticity. It wasn't perfect, but it made the world feel alive in a way that the first games didn't. A Link to the Past benefits from its better sprite work and space for more dialogue to make this feeling of authenticity hit harder. The world in A Link to the Past is great, but the opening in Kakariko also shows how A Link to the Past pays homage to Zelda 1. The objective marker sends you to a character who doesn't know where your goal is. You have to search for the person who can tell you the rest. This was also kind of the case in Zelda 2, but in that game people either had useful info or were generic NPCs. The element of asking around for information rose naturally from that setup, but it wasn't acknowledged in story. A Link to the Past explicitly telling you to search for the next objective is doing something different with this idea. It's telling you that exploration is a core mechanic, that not everything is going to be signposted, and that you need to discover this world, which is a very Zelda 1 concept. In fact, the reason why you didn't start with the sword in Zelda 1 was for a similar teaching moment. Playtesters who were used to arcade games spent the whole time running around, killing enemies, and being confused that they weren't getting points. They missed that the game was about exploration and discovery, so the team put an obvious cave on the first screen of the game and made you go into it to get your sword. It primed you to explore, which is what A Link to the Past is doing with the Kakariko Village section. But what's interesting about that is that A Link to the Past also starts with Link having no sword. In Link to the Past, though, it's done for the sake of the atmosphere the story is building. You get a telepathic phone call right at the start, and your uncle has the sword, so naturally you follow him to see what's going on. You find him dying, and take up the sword in his place, so when you get the sword, the tension is high. Someone just died trying to do what you're about to try, and a first-time player is going to feel that. What that means is that A Link to the Past starts the same way Zelda 1 did, but for the very Zelda 2 reason of setting the mood and building the story. So we've got a Zelda 1 element being used in a Zelda 2 way, and vice versa, both within the first hour of play. These two examples from the early game serve as a good way to illustrate exactly what A Link to the Past is in regards to the first two games, a blending of elements. Zelda 1 is a game about exploration, but it feels empty. The world is a husk that might be full of secrets, sure, but has no presence. Zelda 2's world might have presence, but in doing so it tones down the sense of discovery and exploration. A Link to the Past takes both of these disparate elements and then balances them. The first half may be linear in regards to the dungeons you can do, but it still emphasizes exploration with its high quantity of secrets and ever-expanding world. And the second half becomes a bit more non-linear and exploration-heavy, but it doesn't neglect the story and world building, with side quests like Flute Boy opening up and each of the maidens giving backstory on how the Dark World came to be. More importantly though is that these two elements are done better in A Link to the Past. Some of this is for reasons I've gone into, like the room for more dialogue or the increased quality of secrets, but another important aspect of it is the fact that these elements work together really well. For an example of this, let's look at the guy under the bridge. He gives you a bottle, so there's a strong gameplay reason to come here. But it's also just a fun moment with a comically lazy dude, so it's a good moment for the story as well. It's like being rewarded twice for the same action, and while not everything serves dual purpose the way this moment does, having moments like this helps emphasize both sides of the experience. The exploration is made more rewarding because meeting characters is treated as a reward in itself. And so that's one more thing the game can offer you if you explore. And similarly, since characters are scattered around for the sake of the player finding them, the world feels less static than the Zelda 2 style of only having characters appear in towns. It's a true synthesis of the first two games. It represents the best of both worlds. That on its own would be enough to place this game among the most important Zelda games, but with an eye towards the future, this game is also interesting to consider. The structure of this game is the first where you can start to see what the internet calls the Zelda formula. A lot of people seem content to just drop that and expect you to know what it means, but let's define it real quick. You go through a series of dungeons, with each dungeon giving you an item. This item is used to beat the dungeon's boss and opens up more of the world. You repeat this until some plot point happens to unlock the rest of the dungeons, which you do by following the same rhythm. Neither of the first two games has had this formula in its entirety. In Zelda 1, while you do collect items and kill bosses with them, the world is already mostly available from the word go. And while Zelda 2 does gradually unlock the world as you get items, those items feel more like specific keys than things you actually use. You definitely don't kill bosses with them, that's for sure. And I've already mentioned that neither game really has plot points of any kind, let alone a mid-game twist. A Link to the Past, though, has the initial quest for the 3 pendants. Then you get the Master Sword, lose Zelda, and get the next set of dungeons in the Dark World. It doesn't follow the formula exactly, though. Plenty of dungeon items like the Blue Mail and the Cane of Samaria have little to no impact on world traversal, nor are they used to beat the bosses of the dungeon that they're found in. It does do this sometimes, like with the helmet guy who needs the hammer to beat him, but it's not a rule. There's also stuff like the Armos Knights that are made much easier with the dungeon item, but don't strictly require it. It means that this game feels comfortably familiar if you've played the future games, especially Ocarina of Time. At the same time, though, you can see that this is more of a general structure than a rigidly defined formula like it will become later. And that's also interesting in its own way. It shows that A Link to the Past was still at an experimental point in the series, despite so many staples being introduced here. Empty bottles, the Master Sword, Ganondorf, Kakariko Village, the spin attack, energy tennis, multiple worlds, cutting grass, breaking pots, and, of course, getting murdered by cuckoos. They're all very important to future Zelda games. Heck, in some cases, they're basically synonymous with the Zelda series itself. This is undoubtedly one of the most influential games in the Zelda series, if not in gaming overall. If you couldn't tell after everything I've said, A Link to the Past is a great Zelda game and just a great game period. The gameplay has had most of the rough edges sanded off with good variety in combat that complements the more complex environments. The world is vibrant, alive, and full of secrets that just begs to be explored. The story is good with a sense of progression and history that makes it feel like the events of the game actually matter. And all of these things come together to make A Link to the Past feel like a grand adventure that you're going on, which is, of course, the ultimate goal of the series. It synthesizes the best parts of the previous two games while setting a lot of precedents that the series will utilize for years to come. It's phenomenal, but it leaves us with a rather uncomfortable question. Where do you go after a game like A Link to the Past? How do you follow up something that captures everything the series wants to be so well? Well, according to the Zelda release schedule, the answer is the Game Boy, another 8-bit console and the first handheld game to boot. Is the step down in hardware going to translate to a step down in quality? I guess we'll find out, so please, join me next time when we talk about The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you there.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?